What you're about to see is a rare intro to Sasquatch, the Legend of Bigfoot. This has not been seen in quite a long time. This is from the Blu-ray, the brand new Blu-ray release, which I just got today. Actually came out late last year, but there's, Sasquatch, the Legend of Bigfoot, along with Encounter with the Unknown. So I have never seen this, so this is going to be my first time to see this as well, guys. Hope you all enjoy.
On a night 1 million years ago, an exploding ice age erupted, turning the oceans and land masses into a violent, seething turbulence. It is believed that during this time, a strange prehistoric creature survived and made its way across the frozen Bering Straits of Alaska, settling somewhere in the remote mountain regions of northern Canada. As the first Indian explorers emerged on the North American continent, they began to encounter these strange man-like creatures. Hunting parties moving through dense mountain wilderness told of seeing huge man-like giants that walked on two legs. The coming of the white man brought even more stories, as it was for David Thompson, a fur trapper working for the Hudson's Bay Company in 1811. It was on the morning of January 7th, while Thompson was crossing a high pass in the Canadian Rockies, that he suddenly encountered the tracks of a strange unknown giant. Thompson reported that whatever had made the tracks was walking on two legs. Years later, in 1850, a young fur trapper named William Jessup was returning to his camp after a long day of hunting. Jessup was wise to the ways of the wilderness, but on that particular day, he saw and shot at something he had never seen before. It was late in the afternoon as Jessup headed back to camp. Nearing his camp, he suddenly had the strange sensation that something or someone was watching him. When he reached camp, he found it destroyed. On the ground were the tracks of a strange, unknown giant. He knew that whatever had made the tracks was now hunting him. The story of Jessup is true, and the terrifying event of that day will never be forgotten. But years later, this story would be recounted in a book written by President Teddy Roosevelt. In the late summer of 1906, a young Canadian Indian boy named David Whitecloud made his way slowly along the edge of a high mountain meadow in northern Canada. Lost in the task of learning to hunt, the young tracker had drifted a great distance from the safety of his home and had now entered the forbidden area of his people. Somewhere in the dense forest ahead lurked the mysterious man-like giant of ancient Indian legend. Narrowly escaped the huge hands of the giant creature, and for the rest of his life would recount in awesome terror the memory of that day. Stories of these strange creatures have persisted since the first Indians set foot on the North American continent. But it wasn't until 1941 that the first tangible evidence of these creatures' existence was discovered. Man-like creature that lived more than 500,000 years ago. While the findings intrigued some scientists, it did not substantiate the existence of these creatures by most scientific communities. More proof was needed. In the late 50s and early 60s, as aircraft patrol planes began to fly over areas of remote mountain wilderness, more sightings of these giant creatures were reported. On July 14, 1960, a Canadian aircraft patrol pilot flying at low altitude over a remote section of northern Canada suddenly encountered the huge shape of a strange unknown creature. By now, hundreds of sightings of the mysterious creatures were being reported from the wilderness of northern California to southern Alaska and east into the western boundaries of Montana. These stories began attracting national attention, and with them came the first organized expeditions. This was also the beginning of the North American Wildlife Research Association, whose primary purpose was to centralize all reports and activity concerning these elusive creatures. In 1970, the association and several other well-known investigators began the first computer processing of the hundreds of reports recorded of these giant mysterious creatures. The computer findings revealed for the first time definite behavioral patterns, migratory movements, and the geographical domain of the creature. It was now apparent that these mysterious creatures were shy and reclusive, and would only attack to protect themselves or their territories from intruders. With the knowledge of their seasonal movements for food and shelter, the North American Wildlife Research Association has begun an intensive search into the vast remote wilderness and mountain regions of the Pacific Northwest and Canada. Hundreds of miles of primitive wilderness are now being investigated, sometimes with pack trains, and sometimes on foot. The association has recorded hundreds of sightings and track reports of these searches, but to date, no capture of these elusive creatures has been made. During the last few years, thousands of people throughout the world have sought information concerning these creatures. Now, for the first time, the North American Wildlife Research Association is making available its findings to all interested people. To obtain this information, or to discover how you can personally become involved in this continuing search, send $1 for postage and handling to Bigfoot, Eugene, Oregon, 97401. Information may also be available in the lobby of this theater. And now, ladies and gentlemen, we present to you the motion picture Sasquatch.
And there you are. There it is. That is the intro for Sasquatch, the Legend of Bigfoot. And that intro was thought lost for many years, but it turns out that it was, it looks as if it's been recently found. So, this is going to go on the YouTube channel, and also with Sasquatch, the Legend of Bigfoot. The Blu-ray copy. So, hope you guys enjoyed this. And y'all be good or be good at it, you know. And thanks for tuning in. So, see you guys later.
For over 200 years, there have been reports of giant man-like creatures roaming the vast mountain regions of the Pacific Northwest and Canada. Hundreds of people have encountered these creatures the Indians call Sasquatch. In 1958, newspapers began to publish these stories in which the press called these creatures Bigfoot. And by the early 1960s, the first full-scale expeditions were underway. Bigfoot was attracting national attention and was now rapidly becoming the most intriguing mystery on the North American continent. The most significant find to date is the famous Roger Patterson film taken in 1967. Patterson searched for Sasquatch for years. Examined the individual frames of this film and have come to the conclusion that the film and the creature are authentic. The first pictures ever taken of a Sasquatch. This film gained international attention, and with it came the most comprehensive research effort ever undertaken. Under the supervision of North American Wildlife Research Center, investigators began feeding data into computers. After months of computerized research on behavioral patterns, migratory movement, and eyewitness descriptions, the computer began answering the many questions surrounding these mysterious creatures. By programming information from hundreds of sightings, the computer drew us a picture of Bigfoot. It corresponded with the Patterson film. Researchers have believed that in some remote wilderness where man has never been, these creatures are living in complete solitude. The computers have now pinpointed this area, and here at North American Wildlife Research, we have organized and financed an expedition to search this unexplored area in hopes of capturing a Sasquatch. The final destination of this expedition is north of the river the Indians call the Pecatow, in a primitive part of northern British Columbia. We are taking the latest and most sophisticated equipment: tranquilizer guns, electronic gear, and sniper scopes. If we capture a Sasquatch, we will implant a small transmitter and release the creature so that it can be traced by radio and studied scientifically.
Deep in the heart of the vast wilderness of the Pacific Northwest and Canada, a legend extends back into the spoken history of the earliest Indian tribes. This legend is about the mysterious giant creatures that inhabit these forests. The description of these creatures by those who have seen them gives one the uneasy feeling that somewhere, roaming free and wild in these deep, dark valleys, is a living, breathing reminder of mankind's prehistoric past. This is the legend of the Sasquatch. Today, this legend continues to be told in the Northwest by many responsible people who have reported sightings and encounters with Bigfoot. Because man has never been able to capture a Sasquatch, this creature has become the world's most intriguing mystery. To these men, and to me, the Sasquatch is serious business. This is the beginning of one of the most extensive expeditions ever organized to search the rugged, uncharted country of British Columbia for Sasquatch. It is the hope of all of us on this expedition to prove once and for all that the Sasquatch legend is true. I'm Chuck Evans, the leader of this expedition. I'm the chief investigator for the North American Wildlife Research Center. The man I'm talking to is one of the most distinguished anthropologists in the world, and my good friend, Dr. Paul Markham. He's done extensive research into the Bigfoot phenomena, and he's now one of the leading authorities on Sasquatch. He has helped plan and outfit this expedition, and he's organized this base camp.
Coffee?
We are now in the last phases of our preparations and hope to shove off sometime this morning.
Hank! When did you get in?
We got in yesterday. Had quite a trip over those mountains.
Hank Parshall is an Idaho rancher and one of the country's leading experts on tracking dogs. Because of his keen interest in Sasquatch, he has volunteered his horses, dogs, and time for this expedition. Hank first heard of Sasquatch when he was a small boy, and throughout his life he's talked to many people who claim to have seen one. One of the most colorful characters of this expedition is Joshua Aloysius Bigsby. Josh has been a fixture around the Northwest since the turn of the century. He claims to be at least 80 years old, but no one knows for sure. Not even Josh himself. He's probably the last of the mountain men. He knows every trail in these mountains, and so does his faithful mule, Zeb. Josh is important to this expedition because he is the only one who knows the way to the Pecatow River. From there, Tekka Blackhawk will guide us.
Mr. Evans, thank you.
Your knowledge of the land beyond the Pecatow River is crucial. It's a relief to have you here.
Well, it's a pleasure to be on this trip.
Have you had a chance to work the dogs?
Tekka is a graduate from the University of British Columbia and comes from one of the largest Indian tribes in northern Canada. His Indian background and knowledge of the Sasquatch legends make him one of the most critical members of our expedition. And there's Barney Snipe. He's our camp cook. He's a crack shot with a rifle and an excellent woodsman. He's a little clumsy, but his coffee isn't bad.
I'm Chuck Evans.
Bob Vernon, National News Service.
Has Dr. Markham gotten you squared away?
Yes, and that horse Hank Parshall introduced me to kicked me in the knee 2 seconds after I met him.
I'm glad it wasn't more serious. They tell me that you don't see the point of this expedition.
That's right. I don't believe in Bigfoot. I'm here because I'm good at my job and the pay's good enough to make it all seem practical, if not desirable. I'd much rather be back on the streets in New York City where the enemy is visible and real instead of chasing some mythological boogeyman in the woods.
Can we see you over at Central, Chuck? Be right there, Paul.
Bob Vernon is a reporter for a major news service assigned to do a story on our expedition. Although he's a thorough skeptic, he is an honest writer. But his negative attitude disturbs me.
Hank, are you about ready?
As soon as Dr. Markham finishes packing his last piece of equipment, I'll be ready.
Good. I'll go see if I can give him a hand. In the meantime, go ahead and line him up. Paul, can I give you a hand?
No, thanks, Chuck. I've just about got it.
Well, Hank is ready when you are.
Okay, I'll be ready in a moment.
Vernon, you about ready?
Yeah, I'm ready. This wilderness we're going to can't possibly be as primitive as all these elaborate preparations make it seem.
Well, just hang in there. You may be in for a few surprises. Hey, Josh, move out. Take it easy. Remember, we don't know this place as well as you do.
By late morning, the pack train and animals were loaded, and we pulled out, with old Josh leading the way. We are taking the best in equipment and supplies. And I feel especially pleased that Hank is bringing his finest tracking dogs. The dogs are German Shepherds, trained and selected specifically for this expedition. Unlike hounds, they track silent and will not bark or betray their presence until their quarry is cornered. We were happy to be on our way, but as the chopper buzzed us a last goodbye, we realized that we were leaving our families and civilization behind. It will be weeks before we are resupplied by parachute. After the feverish activity of the last week, the first 2 or 3 days out into the wilderness seemed to welcome relief. The temperature was a mild 70 degrees in the soft air of early June. The skies were a deep Prussian blue. Everyone had the feeling of oneness with nature that comes to all who lose themselves in the Pacific Northwest. It was early summer in the high country, the best time of the year. A wolf nurses her pups until a nosy badger comes too close for comfort. Our expedition was scheduled to last until late fall, until we found the habitat of the elusive Sasquatch. We would search for months in this wilderness of British Columbia, checking the valleys, the mountains, and high country, crisscrossing the hundreds of square miles of trackless forest, seeking a trace of these legendary creatures of North America. We rode through this beautiful land of mountains and valleys for the first weeks, camping each night by some mountain stream. We were to pass many beautiful lakes and mountains and cross hundreds of streams. And later there would be a river to cross that none of us would ever forget. By unspoken consent, the journey was quiet as we traveled through the forest. We did not want to advertise our presence, and it was quite an experience to watch the wildlife on every side as we plunged deeper and deeper into this primitive country. We had been climbing steadily since our departure, and everyone now enjoyed the magnificent scenery that lay in front of us.
Well, Vernon, have you ever seen anything so beautiful?
No. Never. I've hiked a lot of trails and climbed some spectacular peaks, but I've never seen...
Bring your binoculars. Hey, Smokey the boy. It's the most ornery animal there is. We have to put somebody up ahead because it might double back on us.
Cougars were more dangerous than bears.
No, a grizzly is the most dangerous and unpredictable animal there is. A cougar will never attack a man unless he's so darn old he can't catch anything else.
It doesn't look all like me.
Don't count on the way he looks from way up here. You know, a couple of old miner friends of mine were killed right now here by a grizzly.
Well, Bob, are you getting pictures that you like?
Yes, got some
Okay,
beautiful
you
shots of the
guys.
valley this morning.
Cheese salami on the last of the store-bought bread.
Oh, I don't know. That fricasseed mountain rat we had last night wasn't bad.
Whoop, get mountain rat. Well, I bet worse. I remember back in '05 when we was caught in the back country, not to eat except gopher. You ever ate gopher, fellers? Well, it ain't the best in the world, and again, it ain't the worst either.
And Josh ought to know.
Josh, how far do you figure it is to the Pecatow?
Well, at the rate we're going, I figure it'd take about 3 weeks, maybe 4, unless we run across one of them critters.
How many sightings have there been in the area to the east of us, Paul?
I've got 4 in 1966, 9 in 1972. To the north of us, there have been more than 20.
How can you be sure there are Sasquatch in the area where we're going?
Our computer readout shows there have been numerous sightings in the area north of the Pecatow.
That particular area of BC has been taboo for my tribe and others for as long as Indian history goes back. The early white explorers couldn't get anyone to guide them in.
Take a look at this map. This area, it's all dense forest. Running east and west is the Pecatow River. All around the perimeter, we show various sightings of Sasquatch.
How large would you estimate that population to be?
Well, there's really no way to tell. We don't have enough information on how the Sasquatch lives.
Josh, show us where we're headed.
You see that third range of mountains over there?
Yeah.
Well, just behind that is the Pecatow. And just beyond that is the land the Indians call Haya country, or Forbidden Land. You can't see those mountains from here, but they're there. And so's the critter.
As we moved closer to the crest of the first range of mountains, we started to hit small patches of snow. I worried that our progress might be slowed by glaciers or large snowfields that we couldn't cross with horses. Josh assured me that we would skirt the dangerous areas.
What's the matter with these horses? I don't know. They're just sure spooky for some reason. Oh, get out. Get back! He's gonna jump! Good shot, Barney.
I promise, Barney, I'll never badmouth your cooking again.
Hey, Barney, where'd you ever learn how to shoot like that?
That's an inheritance from my old grandpap. It's a darn good shot, Barney.
It's too bad we had to kill him. He was a fine-looking animal. But with the taste of pack horse in his mouth, he'd have followed us. And he'd have got one of them eventually. What's the damage, Hank?
Well, the horse is all right. Cat didn't cut him too bad. It's a good thing. We needed that pack horse.
Well, we'll rest here for an hour. But we've got to be leaving. We've got to be to the next valley by tonight.
you ever see a Sasquatch?
No, not exactly.
What do you mean, not exactly?
Well, I've seen a heap of tracks. Some big ones, some little ones. I remember back in 1912 when we was traveling up the Columbia Riverway with a bunch of fellers doing a bit of hunting. We stopped to camp for the night. Well, during the night, something snuck into our camp and tore it all to shreds.
Maybe it was a bear.
Tore no bear.
How do you know you didn't actually see it?
Well, I seen the tracks the next morning. They's about 18 inches long. No bar has feet that big.
But how many people have you talked to have actually seen a Bigfoot?
Couple dozen, maybe.
Do you believe in that Mount St. Helens story?
I sure do. I knowed old Fred Beck who told me about it. The way old Beck told it to me, he and 3 other fellers was working a mine back in 1924 called the Vanderwyk Mine.
They'd been prospecting and panning a little gold up in the Lewis River country. This is near Mount St. Helens for going on 6 years. They was doing pretty well, too. They'd seen a lot of tracks around during the years, and they always just figured them to be tracks of a big Injun that's still roaming the hills. On this particular day, one of them come back from town with a new assay. It was a dandy. They discovered a pretty good strike of gold, all things considered. They're all kind of excited. They decide to knock off for the day and celebrate their good fortune. They headed back for the cabin as usual, along an old, well-used trail. About midway up the trail, they began to hear the sounds of footsteps behind them, and off the sides, too. Never did see what was in the trees, but something was sure following them. By the time they got back to their cabin, they were pretty scared. Charlie was more scared than the others. And the sounds of those footsteps, it seemed to him like there was more than one of them things out there, whatever it was. Well, they decided they'd eat a quick supper and go to bed. They had heard nothing more from the trees, and they figured that whatever there was out there had gone away. attack went on for most of the night. Sometimes it was still, and other times it increased. The rocks kept crashing down, the cabin kept shaking, and they kept shooting. But they never knew if they hit one of them. Well, just before dawn, the attack stopped. All around the cabin were large footprints of the critters. They was over 18 inches long. And there's a ton or two of rocks that had been thrown down from the ledge. Fred said the apes had did everything they could to get into the cabin. It was built too solid. To this day, that canyon is called Ape Canyon.
Fred always did say there was apes, but the way he described them is a lot bigger than apes.
That's some story, Josh.
I've heard that same story from a whole lot of people up my way. It's always the same. I'm inclined to believe it's the gospel truth.
We're going to have a guard tonight.
You think we need one? Hey, don't worry, Bob. I'll set the dogs on both sides of the camp. If anything moves, they'll let us know.
Just thought I'd ask.
Each day on the trail brought a new experience. Hank noticed that Ochako seemed nervous. A little later, he found out why. When we crested the second mountain range, I realized why Josh had been reluctant to bring outsiders into this spectacular country. It was obvious that this was a wilderness seen by few men and untouched by any of them. It gave us the feeling that we were visitors in a special land that belonged only to the animals. And I hoped it would be theirs forever. In the past weeks, we had crossed many ridges and valleys and spent much of our time on small detours along creek beds where the soft earth would reveal tracks. But we hadn't found a single track of the evasive Sasquatch. Now we were over 200 miles into the interior. Looking back over the country we came through, it seemed impossible that we had made such good time. It was the 4th of July, and we made camp early. The long, hard hours in the saddle made us appreciate any brief moment of relaxation we could find. But we didn't expect the celebration that was beginning to shape up on a nearby glacier. had now crossed the last of the big mountains. From here on, it would be a long downhill ride into the canyons of the Pecatow. Josh estimated about a week to reach the river. But it had been many years since he had traveled this country, and I had the feeling that, well, that he was not certain about what might lie between us and the river. Watching the grizzly fight reminded us how wild this country really was. We followed the game trails whenever we could. Some days we made good speed. Other days we were slowed by heavy timber. Finally, by the middle of July, we reached the Pecatow and across from the raging stream was Sasquatch country.
There she is! I got more like I'd never seen it before. Pretty, ain't it? Ever seen it before, Pecca?
Before I was a young man. It was a lot further downstream. This is higher country. Many evil spirits dwell here.
Can you guide us through that wilderness?
I know the way. All my life I've known the way. It's been told around the campfires of my people for more generations than I remember. All know the way, but none go. Once we cross this river, we move with caution.
We better make camp back up in that meadow. Hank, will you look for a better crossing downstream? Tekka, take a look about.
not for me. Hey, you lousy stealing varmint! No! Don't get up, Barney! What? Don't get lost! Pig pie tonight!
Lo, the mighty hunter returneth.
We searched the river for a better crossing site. The best place was just above camp.
Tecker, I know that you've never been across the Pecatow, but is there anything at all in those Indian legends that might help us out? I'm afraid that these maps just don't cut it.
Only that the land is more dense and rugged. My grandfather once told me the trees are taller and the meadowgrass higher. There'll be no trails at all to follow.
I take it the going will be slow and we'll have a hard time getting the horses through the brush.
Let me see that map, Chuck, my boy. Look at this. Here we are. Now, if you's a Sasquatch living in these here parts, when you're right on this down here where these valleys come together, where there's plenty of water and a lot of food, yeah?
Most of the legends speak of a valley with 3 arms. That may well be it.
Well, then, that's the way we'll go. We'll cross the river in the morning.
We'll have to cross here. It's a doggone treacherous waterfall just downstream.
So we'd better get an early start. I'll ask Barney to rustle us up a cold breakfast.
I had Tecker chain up the dogs tonight.
They're a little restless. I think they got wind or something.
You didn't see the herd of deer that come through this morning, did you? Well, I was awake at dawn. About 8 or 10 deer comes through, about 20 feet away.
Come on, Josh. The dogs would have picked up the smell on them deer.
Nope. Them deer was too smart. They come downwind of the dogs and made nary a sound passing by. You fellers remind me of the story Hank was telling me about old Bauman back in 1850. It was told by none other than Teddy Roosevelt, and he even wrote it down in his book.
I'm not sure I can tell it like Josh could. Yeah, but he's right. It was told by Teddy Roosevelt. Teddy spent a lot of time in that wilderness and was a hard man to fool with a tall tale. He said the story was told to him by an old weather-beaten hunter by the name of Bauman, I think it was. Well, Bauman had to believe that story because Teddy noted that every time he told it, he couldn't keep from shuddering. Well, the whole thing happened back in 1850 when Bauman was a young man. Him and his partners trapping up in the mountains in Idaho. And not having much luck trapping, Bauman and Jessup, not being superstitious men, decided to go up to a particular small stream that was said to have a lot of beaver. But to get to that stream, they had to travel by way of a pass that
Well, it had an evil reputation ever since a year before when a hunter wandered into it and was killed by some wild beast. Well, Bauman and Jessup, calculating that they couldn't get the horses up the pass, traveled on foot till they reached a beaver swamp where they decided to camp for the night. Well, there's still a few hours of daylight, so they built a small lean-to and went on up the creek with the traps. Setting the traps took a little longer than they thought, so they didn't get back to the camp till late in the evening. When they came into the camp, the whole place was just torn up. The lean-to was smashed. Blankets and supplies were just thrown all over the place. And all around the camp, there was footprints just as plain as if they'd been made in snow. And they examined the tracks real close and concluded that whatever it was certainly walked on 2 legs. It was getting too dark to tell much. The 2 men went on to bed with the intentions of studying the tracks in the morning. About midnight, Bauman was awakened by some kind of noise. He saw a black shape come across the front of the lean-to. Grabbed his rifle and fired a shot at it. Could not see what it was. All he knew is that it was running fast. Well, after that, both of them sat by the fire the rest of the night, keeping a close watch for that doggone thing. Whatever it was, that thing came back and stood for an hour or so in the trees across the swamp. It made some god-awful sounds, but didn't come near the camp. In the morning, they both decided to leave the valley just as soon as they could. So they spent the rest of the morning gathering their traps from the creek. And, well, you know something? Every trap was just plumb empty. And by noon, their fears of the past night just kind of dimmed. He even seemed a little bit foolish. So since there was only 3 traps left, Bauman volunteered together, and while Jessup went on into camp to pack up the gear for departure. When Bauman returned to the camp, everything was quiet. He hollered for Jessup. There was no answer. Then, Bauman caught sight of his friend. He was dead. His neck broke, just like it'd been nothing but a twig. Jessup was dead. There wasn't nothing Bauman could do but bury him. There wasn't time to do that before dark, so he just grabbed his pack and headed down the horses where they was hobbled, and he lit out of there just about as fast as a couple of scared horses could handle.
Bauman said as far as he knew, them traps was still up there on the old Salmon River, along with Jessup's bones.
Hank, you think that story is true?
I guarantee doggone to you, a man like Teddy Roosevelt wouldn't have said nothing that didn't believe him.
There are lots of stories on record like that.
Well, I hate to break this up, but I'm going to have to radio home base for some supplies.
Great. I got a list for you. And don't let them forget the Tabasco sauce.
Anyone have anything else they need before I call?
No. Come out of there, you varmint. That's Ticker's outfit. Come on. Out of there. You guys don't know your own place. Who do you think you are? Come on. Come on. Get out of there. You varmint, you!
We suggest you approach from the east out of the sun. The wind is at 5 knots.
Roger.
It was good to see the airplane. The arrival of fresh supplies and letters from home lent a nice feeling to the day. It was comforting to know that we had a direct link with civilization.
There it is, mail from home.
We were now almost 300 miles into the interior. Just an hour and a half flight for the plane, but a good month's trek by horseback.
Oh, my Tabasco sauce!
Later that morning, we attempted the river crossing. It was just as tough as we had thought. The rapid flow of the water and the depth of the stream made it extremely hazardous. Hank started across with the pack horses. Everything was going well until we hit midstream, and then the river was sweeping horses and riders downstream. Tekka managed to throw Barney a rope, and we pulled him out of the river.
How much water did you swallow, Barney? Did you get my hat?
By late morning, we had all crossed the Pecatow, dried out, and were back on the trail. This country north of the river, it seemed different. Even Tekka remarked at the change. We noticed that the mornings were cooler and the sunsets came earlier. The season was changing. This country held a unique fascination for all of us. It was obviously virgin wilderness. We knew that we might catch sight of a Sasquatch at any time. This knowledge would keep us on the alert from now on. There was an abundance of game everywhere, more than I had ever seen before. And none of the animals seemed afraid of us. Perhaps we were the first men and horses they had ever seen. We continued to travel this way for weeks, looking, searching, and watching. We examined every stream bed, checked the soft earth in the meadows. Whenever we'd see a likely-looking meadow, we'd all spread out and look for tracks. When we crossed small streams, Hank would take the dogs and search until he was satisfied that there were no trails or tracks. Because research on Sasquatch has shown that part of their diet consists of plants, Paul Markham spent a lot of his time cataloging the different kinds of forest vegetation. During the whole trip, I never saw him for long without his ever-present notebook.
That's powerful. Yes.
The going was slow and tough, through heavy timber, many times with no trail at all. We began to wonder what had happened to the valleys we had spotted on the maps weeks earlier at the Pecatow River. Some days we were hindered by brush so thick that Tekka had to cut a trail before the horses could move through. The fear of missing our destination was weighing heavily on us. Even some of the meadows were treacherous. My horse, Lava, became mired in a meadow bog. For 3 hours, we worked in the mud while the mosquitoes worked on us. Lava had given up, so I did the last thing I could think of to save his life. The whipping worked, and Lava made a final lunge and freed himself from the mud. If we had lost him, we would have had to redistribute the equipment. And I wasn't looking forward to riding a pack horse. Strange things began to happen.
Watch it!
It was as if someone or something was trying to stop our progress. We began to worry. Were these attacks or simply a quirk of nature? There was no way to explain it. We were all feeling the strain of the long trip, and Bob Vernon was becoming more cantankerous as each day passed. The wilderness had not changed him as I had hoped.
The horses are a little jumpy. I hobbled them instead of tying them up to a picket line. I think we need a guard.
There's nothing to guard against around here except 300-pound mosquitoes.
Well, then you ought to be able to hit one.
Does that mean it's my turn?
Vernon, that attitude of yours is going to get somebody killed.
Aye, aye, Captain.
Careful! Easy. Easy. Roll him over here. God, he's hurt.
All right? He's bleeding.
Barney, get the first aid kit. Right. Hank, Tekka, make sure that grizzly's out of here.
Bob, I'm going to move your arm. And tell me if it hurts, all right?
Okay. Easy to set you up for that, Bob. Careful. Easy. Let's get it off this side.
Watch this arm here.
Easy. Easy with that. Josh, you got the gauze?
Yeah, right here. Well, that ain't too bad. That old grizzly bar didn't hurt you too much. You'll have to take it easy for a spell now. Ooh, careful. It's going to be a little sore. I think you'll live. Ah, good.
The experience with the grizzly was pretty scary to all of us. And as Josh had warned us weeks earlier, the grizzly is the most dangerous of all big game. Vernon didn't talk much about it. His carelessness had just about cost him his life. And now he would have respect for the wilderness. On the morning of the 10th of September, we broke camp and rode as usual. By late morning, a new sensation seemed to engulf the expedition. An unknown presence of danger. It was a feeling of foreboding. The forest around us was vacant of life. The horses were also feeling it and were harder to handle. This uneasiness continued all day. That afternoon, we reached the first valley. After almost 3 months on the trail, we were now entering the area where the computers had told us a population of Sasquatch might exist. Would this be the place where we would find them? No modern expedition had ever encountered a Sasquatch except for Roger Patterson's. Perhaps our effort would be for nothing. We decided to camp at the edge of the meadow, near the head of the valley.
You want some more beans?
No, thanks.
Hey, Barney, we were talking about how to capture a Sasquatch this morning.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I thought of a new way. Throw your biscuits at him.
Yeah. Well, you just wait. That old Sasquatch, he's gonna come wandering into this camp, asking for some of my good cooking.
Yeah.
And you ain't even gonna have your tranquilizer guns ready. Oh!
What you doing? Nothing but an old owl up in the tree.
Yeah, well, that could have been a Sasquatch. It's time you guys got your lookout stations. Your poor old cook needs protection if he's gonna be cooking these good meals and washing dishes and doing all the necessities around this camp.
Barney's right. We'd better get ready.
What if there are 2 or 3 or more?
So much the better, Barney. That'll up our chances with the tranquilizer gun.
Yeah, and our chances of getting killed.
Oh, come on, Barney. Don't be such a coward.
Being as big as he is, Sasquatch could break the back of a man with one blow. We've got to consider him smarter and more dangerous than a grizzly bear. And I don't need to tell you about grizzlies. So don't take any chances.
If he comes, he'll come from the thickest part of the forest. Sightings show he has a tendency to stay under cover.
That'd be over by post 4 where Hank is.
That's right.
Do you think he'll come alone?
Perhaps.
All right. You'd better move out. I can't seem to shake that eerie feeling that I've had all day. It's like
Something's been watching me.
You won't. That feeling that you and I and all of us have is what the Indian legends speak of when Sasquatch is present in an area. This morning we entered the domain of Sasquatch.
Yeah. What is it?
Something's approaching. Listen. Can you hear anything?
No. It's dead quiet.
That's what I mean. Something is approaching. Or it's already here.
Tekka, check in.
I checked the forest with a sniper scope. Couldn't see a thing. The Sasquatch was here all right. I caught his smell on the wind. It's sort of rotten smelling.
Okay. Keep the channel open. Hank?
Yeah, I'm okay. What the heck was that scream?
It had to be a Sasquatch. Nothing else sounds like that. If he gets close enough, put a tranquilizer in him.
Don't you worry.
Josh? Josh? Josh, answer me! Nothing. He must be back in the trees. Where's Josh? Josh, why didn't you answer?
Couldn't. Didn't have this gizmo turned on. No, I thought I smelt the critter. I thought I'd sneak up on him. Couldn't get near him, though. That Sasquatch could have walked right through this camp with all you fellers asleep.
You didn't see it?
Nah, it was in the trees. He's gone now, though.
Gone.
Just listen. The forest sounds are coming back.
Well, the next time you go traipsing off, let someone know. We thought it might have got you.
Nah, not a chance. Well, I think he'll hit the sack. He won't be back tonight.
Most of us were rather tired and sleepy the next morning, although Josh had slept like a baby. The rest of us sure hadn't. It had been a disturbing experience. At the first light of day, we began to cover the meadow to check for tracks. Those screams had been so close, we knew we should find some evidence of what had made them.
They're about 4 hours old. Made this morning, look. The edge of the print is still sharp.
After all this time.
Here's the other impression. They're about 6 feet apart.
16 and a half. 8 and a half at the ball. An inch and a half deep. Estimate the creature to weigh somewhere between 800 and 900 pounds.
He must have been standing right here, looking down on us last night.
Here's another one.
Let's get a cast made of this one. Barney, the resin kit.
You bet.
I'll see if I can pick up a trail with the dogs.
We made one cast of each foot. We were using the new resin materials, which took longer to dry than plaster of Paris, but this substance is practically indestructible. We had finally found our first Bigfoot tracks. Paul was more excited than I had ever seen him. There was no doubt in his mind now that Sasquatch was a living, breathing creature. Hank and the dogs followed the trail which led out of the meadow, through some trees, and ended at the base of a steep rock cliff. It looked as if the Sasquatch had climbed right up over the top. It would be impossible for us to follow. Only experienced mountain climbers could get to the top, and of course the creature had crossed over by now.
Vernon?
Tekka pointed out that the cliff curved in the same direction we were headed.
No way we can get the expedition over.
If the Sasquatch continued in a straight line, we might pick up his trail on the other side. We decided that Hank and Tekka would walk around with the dogs. We would break camp and meet them with the horses. Late that afternoon, wind had covered the tracks with dust, and the first of the fall storms was approaching. For 2 days, we traveled in heavy rain and could only hope the rain would not turn to snow. We stopped for lunch in the trees, but Tekka was never still. He roamed the edge of the meadow, looking and searching.
Shark! More tracks!
It's the same pattern. See the resemblance in the print? The ball of the foot has this big lump on the side. It's the same creature.
How old is the track?
2, maybe 3 hours old. Made this morning for sure. They're heading the same way we are. The dogs can take it from here once we're ready to go.
We were back on the trail, and now there wasn't any question about the direction the creature was headed. If the Indian legends were correct, we were nearing the heart of Sasquatch country. The storm broke, and we were to enjoy a few warm days of Indian summer. We continued our journey with the ever-present feeling of uneasiness.
Oh.
In the next valley was the most awesome sight I had ever seen.
Recognize that sign, Paul?
Yes. That's the way the Sasquatch marks the outer perimeter of his domain. It's incredible. Incredible.
It is as the ancient ones have said. The Sasquatch are in the place of the three valleys. From here we go with danger.
Broken trees at that height indicated a creature that could stand over 10 feet tall and weigh better than 1,000 pounds. It was a frightening realization. The tremendous strength it would have taken to break those trees off so cleanly. And I think we all began to understand the danger we were in. There were no sounds of the forest. It was obvious to all of us that we were now in the heart of the Sasquatch domain. There were tracks everywhere in the soft earth of the meadow, of different sizes and moving in different directions. We reached the third valley. Here you could feel the presence of Sasquatch. We could catch a faint odor on the wind. The valley opened into a large meadow surrounded by dense forests, and a lake protected the north entrance. Tekka suggested we camp on a knoll above the meadow near the tree line. It was out of the swampy area, and we would have the lake on one side for protection. Now our chances for making a capture were better than ever. We had to be ready to take advantage of any opportunity. We set up camp and began rigging the electronic sensing device. It was developed by the research center as an alarm system to monitor creature movement in mountain country. Properly set, the console here at camp will tell us the location, speed, and direction of an approaching Sasquatch. While Josh and I strung the main wire from the console, Markham, Tekka, and Vernon began setting the perimeter wires on the other side of the lake. The inner perimeter was placed around the edge of the meadow. These wires are so fine, a Sasquatch will not know when he breaks one. The outer perimeter wire was placed 350 yards back in the trees, circling the meadow. These wires were attached to insulators 5 feet above the ground, high enough for normal animals to pass under, but low enough that a Sasquatch cannot avoid it. Using metal rods, we established gates throughout the perimeter so that when a section of wire is broken, we can pinpoint the creature's location on the console. There were 8 gates in each perimeter. Paul, will you check me out on this again?
This is our outer perimeter. We've set it about 300 yards back into the trees. Corresponds with this amber row of lights. This is our inner perimeter. It's about 50 yards away from the end of the meadow. Corresponds to this white row of lights. Anytime he moves through any one of these gates, corresponding light will go on. If he moves into the inner perimeter, he should be close enough for one of our men to get a shot at.
And if they miss, and he keeps on moving, we'll be ready for him right here.
Exactly.
We are using the most potent tranquilizer known. Markham recommended we load the darts with twice the amount normally used for grizzly bears. These guns have a range of 70 yards and will be equipped with sniper scopes. The late afternoon was spent testing the trip gates and checking the guns. By dusk, we were ready. We ate a quiet dinner. The thought of what could happen this night was on everyone's mind. We knew the Sasquatch might come, and with it our opportunity to capture the greatest anthropological find of all time. We wanted to make a capture, but if things got out of hand, we would have to protect ourselves. Hank, Tekka, and Vernon volunteered to take positions in the inner perimeter. The rest of us stayed to protect the camp.
There it is, gate 4 to the west. Listen, everyone. He's just broken gate 4. Hank, that's in your sector. He should be just beyond the edge of the tree line. Gotcha. Hank, he's moving. He's just broken gate 3 in sector 2. He should be just beyond you, just to the left of you, in the trees.
No. I can't see a thing.
Chuck, he's still circling the meadow.
He's close. I can hear him breathing.
Heads up. The creature's changed directions. He's moving in a semicircle towards the other end of the meadow. Second, there's another creature on your side. He's just broken gate 8.
I can hear him moving. Just inside the line of trees. I can't see him. But I can hear him. The sound is coming from near gate 7.
Around us.
Vernon? Vernon! There's one in the camp!
Watch it! here, fast! Look out! Josh! Get the light!
It is done. We can go home.
And it was over. The Sasquatch didn't return. Our camp and equipment was smashed and ruined. We had several injuries. Barney had a vicious cut on his head. Markham's knee was shattered. And poor Bob Vernon was in shock.
Could you pick up the trail?
Yeah. Wasn't hard. Checker was right. They done took on out of this area. There's a whole lot of tracks leading off to the west. They seem to be moving real fast. We'll never catch him now.
It looks like we're finished here.
Jug, coffee?
As soon as we get this mess packed up, we'll move out. Barney? A good cup of coffee.
Our equipment was completely destroyed. With the injuries and the fact that winter was approaching, it was imperative that we head back. As we leave the valleys of the Sasquatch, the questions still remain. Are they a unique type of being, neither human nor animal? And how have they managed to exist until now, hidden from the view of man, deep in this wilderness of North America? We had found the habitat of the Sasquatch. Our efforts will provide volumes of information to stimulate preparations for more extensive expeditions. And next spring, when the snows begin to melt in the high country and the Sasquatch return, we might be here too, in the forbidden valleys of the Bigfoot, tracking and studying mankind's greatest mystery.
High in the mountains, there lives a legend few people have seen. High in the mountains, strong makes the high mountain his home. There in God's country, he just wants to be left alone. Wild as the wind, he travels in places where men dare not go.